Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it on stage, under the lights, in front of 200 people. Touch me and I'll scream. They thought it was part of the play, but I knew it wasn't. Her voice didn't come from the script. It came from that quiet place between contempt and calculation. The kind of tone you can't EQ out of a mic. I stood in the back of the theater, behind the soundboard, hands on the sliders. Everyone laughed. She smiled, the kind of smile that burns slow, and I felt something cold crawl through me. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just turned her mic down half a decibel, so her next line came out softer, less real. That was all I could do, mute her a little. Her name's Emma, my wife, or she used to be. The man beside her, Jake, was her new scene partner. Younger, louder, the kind of guy who'd never fixed a cable in his life, but thought applause meant power. I'd watched him watch her for weeks. How he stayed close after rehearsals. How she didn't stop him. She'd come in every morning with a Dunkin' cup in her hand, humming lines from the script, pretending not to notice me setting the mics she'd use later. Once, she left her cup next to my board, her lipstick on the lid. Jake picked it up, took a sip, laughed. She didn't stop him then, either. That night's performance was supposed to be the opening scene of a new play, but it felt more like a funeral, for something I couldn't name yet. When she looked into the crowd, she didn't see them. She saw me, standing in the dark, where I always was. She knew I'd heard every breath, every pause, every lie wrapped in dialogue. When the show ended, applause filled the air. She bowed, radiant, flawless in her H&M dress that looked expensive under the lights. I muted her mic completely. The audience kept clapping, but all I heard was silence. After the curtain fell, I packed up the cables, logged the sound files, and left through the back door. Outside, my Nissan Altima waited under a flickering streetlight, the same car she used to mock for being too quiet. I sat there for a while, engine running, her voice still echoing in my head. Touch me, and I'll scream. I didn't. And now she screams into silence. The first time I noticed the shift, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like a light dimming without anyone touching the switch. Emma started staying late after rehearsals, always with an excuse. Just running lines, she'd say, slipping her phone into her bag before I could see the notifications lighting up the screen. Jake was always the last to leave with her. I knew because I was the one locking up. In this job, you learn to hear what people don't say. The pauses, the nervous laughter, the moments when silence stretches too long. That's where the truth hides. One night, I was balancing the levels for a rehearsal scene, one of those emotional confrontations. Her mic caught her whispering before the cue, a soft, private tone that didn't belong to the script. I froze, eyes on the soundboard, listening. Jake laughed under his breath. Then came her line, loud, rehearsed, perfect. But that whisper stayed in the air long after the echo faded. She started dressing differently, less for comfort, more for effect. Everything H&M, polished, minimalist, like a costume for real life. When she passed me in the hallway, the scent of her perfume lingered longer than her words. You look tired, she said once, like I was the one fading. I started leaving the theater later, after everyone was gone. Sometimes I'd sit in my car, engine off, watching the exit door through the windshield. The reflection of her silhouette appeared, laughing, her arm brushing his. She'd get into an Uber, not even glancing my way. That night, I drove home without turning on the radio. The hum of the tires replaced the music I used to play on Spotify. My playlist, Noise Floor, was just silence now. No drums, no bass, just thought. She was performing a version of herself that didn't need me. I was still the one adjusting her frequencies, making sure her voice cut through the crowd, while mine dissolved in the background. People think betrayal comes like a thunderclap. It doesn't. It seeps in, drop by drop, until the room you built together starts to feel airless. I didn't confront her. I didn't chase. I just listened. Because sound never lies. And hers was already changing. Proof never comes all at once. It arrives in fragments, like broken glass under a spotlight. You don't want to see it, but you can't unsee it once it's there. It started with a message left open on the control room computer. Hers, sent from the theater Wi-Fi. She'd forgotten to log out. The words were small, almost harmless at first glance. We need to rehearse that scene again, privately. That word, privately, sat there like a stain that wouldn't wash out. After that, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. A scarf left behind in the dressing room that wasn't hers. Her laugh echoing from behind a closed curtain after hours. The way her mic stayed on a few seconds longer after rehearsal, catching whispers she never meant to be heard. Once, I heard her say his name with a softness she hadn't used with me in months. The sound burned more than any image could. I didn't confront her. I documented. Sound logs, timestamps, playback notes. I wasn't trying to trap her. I just wanted to hear the truth with my own ears. Every night, after the theater emptied, I sat there with my Dunkin' cup going cold, listening to the day's recordings through my headphones. It felt like studying the anatomy of a lie. The more I listened, the less of her I recognized. Her Target bag sat in the corner of the green room for weeks. New candles, makeup, things for the role. She used to leave me little notes inside those bags, reminders to eat or jokes about the crew. Now they were empty, like the gestures had evaporated with the warmth behind them. Jake grew bolder. His hand on her waist no longer belonged to the scene, but no one dared call it out. Maybe they thought it was just method acting. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. I understood. That's how silence spreads. It protects the performance. One night, while syncing the final act, I played back a recording and realized the mic had caught something the audience never heard. A quiet, satisfied laugh between takes. Two voices. One truth. That was the night I stopped adjusting her sound. I started turning it down instead. Disappearing doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes, it means becoming invisible in plain sight. The next morning, I walked into the theater like nothing had changed. Same keys, same hallway, same routine. But something inside me had shifted. I spoke less. I smiled less. I started blending into the noise I used to control. Emma didn't notice at first. She still tossed her Dunkin' cup on my table like before, expecting me to throw it away. She still rehearsed with Jake too close to her, calling it chemistry. I nodded, adjusted levels, said nothing. The crew joked that I looked like a ghost lately. Maybe I was. One night, after the show, she came up behind me, her reflection appearing beside mine in the booth's glass. "You've been quiet lately," she said. Her tone was light, rehearsed, like another line in the play. I kept my eyes on the console and told her everything was fine. She waited for me to look up. I didn't. That was the first time I saw confusion in her face instead of confidence. She left without another word. I stayed, letting the silence hang where her voice used to be. After that, I stopped texting her between shows. No good lucks, no dinner plans, no small talk. I turned off location sharing. I didn't block her, but I didn't answer either. She'd call once, twice, then stop. That was how distance begins, quietly, like feedback fading after a show. When I left the theater that night, I took the long way home. The city felt different, sharper somehow. My car hummed beneath me, headlights stretching over the empty road. I didn't play music, just the sound of the tires against asphalt and my thoughts moving at their own pace. The next day, I arrived early, before anyone else. I reprogrammed the sound system, small adjustments no one would notice. From then on, every performance ran perfectly, but her mic would cut out for half a second at random moments. To the audience, it was nothing. To her, it was everything. It was control slipping away. She once said she wanted the world to hear her. Now, even her own voice couldn't reach her the same way. I hadn't left. I was just done amplifying her. Jake was everywhere now. On the posters, on the director's lips, in the green room where his laughter spilled like cheap wine. He'd become part of the theater's soundscape, unavoidable. But fame makes people sloppy. And Jake was no exception. One night, I found a memory card left in the booth, a recording from one of their private rehearsals. It wasn't scandalous. Not exactly. Just careless. Her voice, soft, saying things meant to stay behind closed curtains. Words that blurred the line between method acting and manipulation. I didn't delete it. I didn't keep it for revenge. I just listened once, then filed it into the archives, under her name, like all her other performances. That was enough. The truth didn't need exposure. It only needed to exist. The next week, a local journalist visited the theater, doing a piece on emerging talents. Jake couldn't resist the spotlight. He bragged about the realism of their scenes, about how close the cast had become. The reporter asked if I could pull clean sound from rehearsal tracks for the article's online feature. I I sent over the files, including that one, unedited, untrimmed. I didn't say a word. By the next morning, whispers were crawling through the building. Not loud, but persistent. Her professionalism, her boundaries, her method, all under quiet scrutiny. She came into the control room that evening, eyes red, holding her phone. "Did you send something?" she asked. I told her the truth. They asked for clean audio. I gave them what we had. That was it. She didn't speak after that. Just stood there, breathing like she was trying to catch up to herself. Then she left. The next few nights, her performances were tight, uncertain. The applause didn't sound the same anymore. I made sure her mic worked flawlessly, no cuts this time. I wanted her to hear every second of it. Driving home, I watched the city pass by through the window of my car. My reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, calm, detached. Spotify stayed silent. I didn't need a soundtrack. Her voice had already filled enough space in my head. And for the first time, it was starting to fade. The theater started to feel different after that week. The laughter in the halls turned cautious. Conversations stopped when I walked in. No one said anything, but everyone knew something had shifted. Emma carried herself like someone balancing on a thin wire, smiling for the audience, trembling behind the curtain. She still hit her marks, still delivered her lines, but the warmth in her voice was gone. What came out now sounded hollow, almost rehearsed within the rehearsal. I kept doing my job. Levels perfect. Timing perfect. No emotion. Just control. The director even praised me for professional consistency, not realizing that indifference had replaced devotion. Every show became an echo chamber of her past choices. The same stage where she once performed love now amplified her isolation. At intermission one night, I overheard two actresses whispering near the sound booth. "Did you see how she looked at him tonight?" one said. "Like she's afraid he might not look back." They weren't talking about Jake. They meant me. That was the irony. After everything, the absence of attention hurt her more than the exposure ever could. After the show, she lingered near the exit, waiting for me. I walked past her without slowing down. She called after me, voice soft, uncertain. I didn't stop. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had in months. I got into my car and drove without looking in the rearview mirror. A few days later, Jake quit the production. The story was that he'd gotten another offer in a different city. But everyone could tell he was leaving a mess behind. Emma tried to pretend it didn't affect her, but she looked smaller on stage, as if every spotlight revealed the cracks she once hid so well. Her Target bag still sat in the dressing room corner, untouched since that first night. Inside it, I found a candle, lavender, unopened. The tag still read, "For calm." I left it there. Calm wasn't something you could buy anymore. When the curtain fell that evening, applause came late and faded fast. She bowed alone, the sound thinner than ever. And from the booth, I watched the woman who once demanded the world's attention lose it one silent second at a time. By the third week, silence had replaced everything that used to sound like home. Emma stopped saying good morning. The crew stopped asking about her. The space between her and the rest of us grew wide enough to feel physical, like standing too close to an open window in winter. She used to own the room when she walked in. Now, even her reflection in the mirror looked unsure which face to wear. I saw her one afternoon, sitting alone in the dressing room, still in costume. She was staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. The door was cracked, so her voice carried through the hallway when she whispered, "It's too quiet." I almost answered out of habit, but I didn't. The sound engineer doesn't interrupt the silence. He lets it build. She began showing up earlier to rehearsals, lingering near the sound booth like she wanted to ask something but couldn't find the right line. Once, she left a Dunkin' cup on my table again. Fresh coffee this time, not the cold leftovers she used to abandon. I didn't touch it. When she came back for it later, it was still full, the lid untouched. That was the first time she looked at me like she realized she'd lost something that couldn't be replaced. At night, I'd leave the theater and drive through the same stretch of road. No music, no destination. The headlights washed over the empty storefronts, and the only sound was the hum of the car. I'd think about how strange it was that someone could fill a room with noise and still have nothing left to say. The director announced a new schedule, fewer performances, smaller crowds. The buzz around her name had cooled. The same people who once fought for her attention now avoided her dressing room. Fame fades fast when the spotlight turns into a mirror. That night, when I adjusted her mic before curtain, her hands trembled. For the first time, she thanked me. Her voice cracked on the word. I didn't respond, just tested the line, nodded, and stepped back into the dark. From there, I could see her clearly, center stage, surrounded by light, but somehow already gone. The night she finally broke the silence, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost hesitant. The play had ended early, a smaller crowd than usual, polite applause fading before the curtain even hit the floor. I was coiling cables when she appeared at the edge of the booth. No makeup, no script, just her. For the first time in months, she looked real. She stood there, unsure, watching me wind the cords. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, like she was asking permission to breathe. I didn't answer right away. I just kept working, the sound of cables sliding through my hands filling the space between us. She took a step closer. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. Her voice cracked on the word meant. It sounded smaller than I remembered. I didn't look up. My reflection in the booth glass showed her standing there, waiting. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to ease her discomfort. But that time had ended somewhere between her applause and my silence. I told her, calmly, "I'm doing my job." She stayed quiet after that, searching my face for something familiar. When she realized there was nothing left to find, she nodded and walked out. The door closed softly, but the echo stayed. Driving home that night, I thought about what she'd said, how every apology comes too late for the person who deserves it. My phone buzzed twice in the passenger seat. Her name lit up, then disappeared. I didn't touch it. The road ahead was empty, the streetlights flickering like fading spotlights. The next morning, she came in early again. No coffee, no smile, just a look that lingered too long. During rehearsal, she forgot a line, something she'd said 100 times before. The director called for a break. She didn't move, just stood there, staring toward the booth, toward the place I used to watch her from. I adjusted the sliders, made sure her mic was live. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Can you hear me?" I could, but I didn't answer. Some questions deserve silence more than truth. Time has a way of stripping illusions. Within a month, Emma wasn't the star anymore. She was the story everyone avoided mentioning. The director shifted focus to new faces, younger, hungrier, untouched by scandal. Her dressing room, once full of flowers and notes, now smelled like dust and old perfume. She still came in early, still rehearsed her lines, but every night the applause thinned a little more, like the audience could sense the distance she tried to hide. I stayed in the booth, steady, precise, invisible. I mixed her shows the same way I had before, but something in the tone of her voice had changed. It wasn't arrogance anymore, it was pleading. Every word sounded like a question she couldn't ask aloud. During one performance, she stumbled mid-scene. The audience thought it was part of the act, but I saw her eyes drift toward the sound booth, searching for the person who used to anchor her. I didn't move. After the curtain fell, she waited backstage. When I passed, she said, "You used to make me sound alive." I kept walking. There wasn't cruelty in it, just truth. You can't resurrect what someone killed with their own applause. The following week, Jake returned to the theater for a guest appearance. His energy filled the space instantly, loud and careless. Emma tried to act indifferent, but her voice trembled through the mic when she greeted him. The chemistry that once thrilled her now embarrassed her. People noticed. Someone whispered, "She doesn't glow anymore." And they were right. That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. I watched the stage lights fade one by one, until only the glow from her mic remained, a single red dot in the dark. I turned it off. Outside, the rain started. I sat in my car, engine off, windshield streaked with water. My phone buzzed again. Her name, once more. I let it ring. The sound blended with the rain until it became something unrecognizable. She once said she'd scream if I touched her. Now she was screaming into silence, and I wasn't there to hear it. The theater closed for renovation at the end of the season. A quiet announcement, no drama, no farewell speech. Just a notice taped to the glass doors and an empty calendar. That was how our story ended, not with fire, but with silence. On the final night, I stayed late to pack the booth. Cables, drives, scripts, all the fragments of a life spent behind the soundboard. The stage below was dark, but I could still picture her there, standing in that same spot where she used to demand attention. Now there was only dust where applause used to echo. She came in just before midnight. No costume, no audience, just a gray coat and tired eyes. She stood in the aisle, looking up toward the booth. "You're really leaving?" she said, not as a question. I nodded. There was nothing else to say. She walked closer to the stage, her voice barely carrying. "I thought this place needed me," she whispered. "Turns out it needed you." I watched her words disappear into the empty air. I finished winding the last cable and shut down the console. When I stepped out, she was still there, standing under the spotlight that no longer worked. I paused beside her, close enough to hear her breathing. For a second, I remembered how she once filled this room with sound. Then I said, "You once told me not to reach for you." She looked up, waiting for more, but I didn't give her any. I walked toward the door, the echo of my footsteps carrying farther than her voice ever had. Outside, the cold air hit like clarity. My car waited at the curb, the same quiet engine, the same hum. As I drove away, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and gray. My phone buzzed again, her name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. Some echoes are meant to fade. When I reached the highway, I rolled down the window and let the wind fill the silence she'd left behind. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And somewhere behind me, under a dead spotlight, she finally realized what silence really sounds like. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.